I'm happy to introduce Mr. Gururaj Deshpande. So he's the product delivery and global operations leader in Ernst & Young. He had a previous stint at Infosys for a couple of decades, so he has long tenure in the IT services space. So he's here with us to share his insights on what is the past, current, and future landscape of running an IT services company. With that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Gururaj Deshpande.
Thank you. I'll try and give you some time back. Let's see. The good news is I don't have a presentation, right? So you can completely focus on what I'm talking about, because I believe presentations tend to kind of start reading, right? You start capturing the information that's out there. So let's keep it very interactive. Hopefully you can keep it very focused as well, right? I know we have a very mixed audience here, right? So some youngsters, some people who seem to be already in the industry. I think some of you are already doing IT services companies, as I could gather, right? Is that fair? Who's running IT services companies already here? Anybody? Okay. There are a few people on this side of the room. And then who's aspiring to open up any IT service entities, anything to do with IT service? Okay, there are some people there as well. And the youngsters at the front, what do you want to do with IT services? What's your interest area? Oh, you're already working, right? Phenomenal. Okay, awesome. So we have a mixed group. So I'm just curious to know, top of the mind, right? What do you want to know about today? What shall we talk about? Of course, I'll present a view of the sector and the past, present, future. We'll cover that. Anything else you want to bring about today, which is going to be a learning for all of us? Go ahead.
Obviously, AI impacting IT services.
Okay, superb. That's the elephant in the room, as they call it, right? So we'll take it up. How is AI affecting IT services? Very good question. Right here, right now situation, right? Okay, what else? Quick, one or two things.
Is humans getting the only way to scale?
What's that? Humans?
Humans.
Okay.
The only way to scale.
Okay, super. Somewhat related. We'll talk about that as well. Okay. Any other perspective?
The impact of GCC for IT services.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll keep them as the big rocks to talk about, right? So let's do some level setting. Most of you are well aware, as you saw in my background, been with IT services for a very long time, almost 32 years now. So started small. Obviously, India has become a absolute powerhouse. Fair to say, right? From an IT services perspective, whenever we use the term IT services, it's a very broad spectrum. All of you understand that, right? So it could mean a whole variety of things. The spectrum is only becoming bigger and bigger, right? Today it encompasses everything from data and AI on the one side to what used to be day-to-day app development, testing, and cloud and digital and front-end experience, and everything is IT service, right? It's a very wide open segment, so to say, and it involves, of course, not just coding, but it also involves a whole lot of consulting and hand-holding of any sort, right? So all of that is still IT service. And the sector itself obviously employs well over 6-7 million people in India, which still is a very small percentage of the population. Sometimes we start to believe that IT has taken over, but in sheer population terms, just look at the headroom left in terms of how much there is to do, right? So what makes India attractive today? Already it is a powerhouse, like I said. I think there are well over 150,000 IT services companies in India. And it almost seems to me, after about 30 years in the industry, that only now I think our time has come. I really feel that way, right? We may already feel that we've been here for long, but I certainly feel that our time has just now come. And I'll tell you why, right? So I said 150,000 plus services companies. You know the very big ones. TCS, of course, is the largest in India. And then, of course, closely followed by there is Infosys, there is the Wipros, the Cognizant. Cognizant is typically not considered an Indian IT company, but we often count it because they have such a large base here. Then, of course, so they are all well over, I think Infosys close to 20. And then, of course, there is HCL Tech. So those are the big ones. And then as you start to come down, there is, you start to see the 1 billion kind of companies. And then there's a big long tail as well, right? So it's a very wide open space. The sector employs well over 6-7 million professionals, as I said. So those are the traditional IT service companies, as we call them. And then there are the GCCs, right? Somebody raised the question of the GCCs. Again, there are well over 1,800, 2,000 global capability centers. If any of you are hearing the word GCC for the first time, what we used to kind of loosely call captives in the past, right? So we have a much more respectable word for that now, which is GCC, Global Capability Centers. What it really stands for is essentially it's for global companies all over the world. It could be Mercedes-Benz, it could be GE, it could be Allianz, Insurance, what have you, right? You pick any name, Intel, anything. So essentially it's a center set up in India to serve as a global capability pool of people, right? And then the reason GCCs are thriving today, of course, IT services companies have evolved from the 80s, 90s to the big institutions they are now, right? So each of those companies themselves employ so many people. Infosys, for example, employs well over 350,000 people. But the game has started to change, right? What used to be then mainly labor arbitrage. Let's think about it that way, right? It started as labor arbitrage. A programmer in the US, in those days, of course, when you pick up a COBOL programmer, maybe, right? Maybe a COBOL programmer would charge probably $150 per hour. Maybe those days it was $100 per hour or whatever, right? Compare it with an Indian COBOL programmer probably charging $20 an hour, right? So there is a very clear arbitrage already. So the industry started with arbitrage, right? Obviously, as we all know, and then slowly it started to mature. What made India attractive then, of course, was a lot of things. The sector opened up in the 90s, liberalization, everything around foreign remittances and getting a connection, satellite links. There's a whole lot of enablers that happened back in the 90s, right? So there was arbitrage. India was opening up. We had great pool of English-speaking talent, which has only started to grow. As you know, India produces the most graduates in the world. Again, in the big chunk of graduates, few are employable. Still, many are still not there yet. So we still have a lot of opportunity as well. So started as arbitrage, but then jump ahead to today, the game has started to change because India has started to really level play with, say, people in the US or wherever they are, right? Because our people have started to understand the bigger picture. They can understand strategy. They're not just programming. And then there has been a resurgence. All the people who started back in the 80s or the 90s are all now leading many of these entities. So they can rub shoulder to shoulder with all the companies of the world. They have the experience, they have the strategy, and they have brought all of that into play at the GCCs, right? So today, if you look at GCCs, if you take 10, 15 years ago, GCCs only had, maybe they would have 500 people or 1,000 people at the lowest end of the pyramid. And then the GCCs are all micromanaged from elsewhere in the world. Right? So just the namesake GCC was here, but the remote control button was elsewhere in the world. Right? But then what has started to change on the GCC side as well, and then I'll also talk about the Indian IT service companies, is the quality of work that you do. Right? The quality of work that you do within the GCCs has started to change. A lot of innovation is being driven out of the GCCs. You're not just doing low-level work, but you're doing complete ownership of products. For example, if there is a Morgan Stanley or a Bank of America or whatever, today some of the business senior vice presidents or whatever, they're actually sitting here and running those entire slices of business, unlike the earlier bottom of the pyramid. So the GCCs are thereby becoming solid strategic centers as well for each of these companies, and not just low-skilled, low-cost programming entities or anything. So that's the emergence of the GCCs. Again, it's a very wide spectrum, but obviously we will see a lot more GCCs come up, I think, in the next few years. And what makes it attractive is exactly what I said, the talent availability. Today, I think a programmer, say, coming out with a computer science degree from, say, NIT Surathkal or wherever is equally competent with somebody, say, who's coming out from the US. I think today communication is no problem. Their ability to think is no problem. The access to tool sets is absolutely the same. There is absolutely no disadvantage of any sort, right? So I think it's become a very level playing field of sorts when it comes to the talent pool. So there's the GCCs. Then I spoke of the large scale IT services companies. And then of course, I spoke of the 150,000 plus service companies in India, right? The play is phenomenal. We often tend to think of only the big companies, but then think of all the smaller companies which have started to play. Some people have been in specific domains. Some people have been playing in the finance space. Some people have been in the insurance space. So there has been a lot of boutique IT service play as well, which we often don't get to talk about. But clearly, they have all contributed to the emergence of the sector. Now, Now let's talk about what's changing, right? And maybe we'll also take a few questions as well. Largely the model. Let's talk about the model for a little bit. The model so far, as I said, started with arbitrage, which meant that all of the working model was typically time and material, right? People would say, hey, we have all these people, you bill them at about $20 an hour. If they're very skilled, maybe $30 an hour, right? Or super skilled, maybe $50 an hour, something like that. So it was all time and material billed per hour to clients, right? That is how the model started. And slowly the big companies started to take on big scale engagements, which means, okay, give me the entire landscape of your company, right? I'll manage the whole IT piece, or I'll manage the whole digital transformation piece, and I start to take it on a fixed ownership kind of a basis. So the maturity kind of moved up from time and material into fixed ownership. So give me like a total cost of ownership of this portfolio, so to say, right? And then increasingly of late, the game has also started into more large scale digital transformation. I have a IT landscape which is old. How can you modernize, put it on a completely new stack, put it on the cloud, change the front end experience, remove the mainframe, bring in all of the new technologies into play, things like that, right? So the service companies have matured to an extent where they are able to put some more risk at play, right? And take on complete ownership, bring in predictability, and drive those changes as well. So there is a maturity curve moving from what was traditional time and material work to more ownership based activity, right? So that's what is happening. Let's talk a little bit about what's changing. So that's been the model so far. It has been largely linear. So add people, add revenue. Absolutely, right? I think somebody raised the question on the linearity of the model. So far, it still is the case. Although companies have been trying to break that cycle with linearity, it's still been largely linear. Add more people. So which is why an Infosys or a Wipro or a TCS every year adds thousands and thousands of people, right? What they do, they go to the campuses every year. In fact, they are all called mass recruiters, right? So that's the word the industry uses, because they obviously hire people by the thousands every year. So their growth relies on ability to hire thousands of people. Go ahead.
In terms of productivity of a particular software now versus say 20 years ago, have you seen growth of productivity per employee?
I think there has been, absolutely. I think there has been, probably not to the extent desired. Again, the definition of productivity itself has changed, right? So the industry has obviously seen, and I'll link it back to the AI as well eventually, but the industry has already seen productivity jumps. And also, and I say productivity not in just the quantum of work delivered per employee, but also in the speed to market. Right? Clearly, the speed to market in my time, I remember when I started my career in 94, my productivity then was, obviously there was no internet, right? I'm talking about a different era. I would carry tapes from here to Switzerland to actually put them in the server in Geneva, right? And into the customer's machine, and then deploy my software, right? So we're talking about having moved from those times to almost deploying software daily. Maybe even hourly, right? Some companies deploy hourly software today. And all that is happening because of the productivity gains that came through not just people becoming better, but also through the use of tool sets, right? Lots and lots of tool sets. And clearly there is an abstraction going on, right? Today, earlier in my day and age, we were coding at the complete grassroots level, right? And then we started to abstract. The complexity has started to abstract, right? Today, my son is 18. He came last week and he's doing a small internship. And his ability to think code is so different from mine, because he is just thinking abstract all the time. He's not thinking about grassroots error handling and stuff like that, right? So he's just thinking high level business logic, whereas my mind immediately starts to think about garbage collection and catching errors and stuff like that. So it's a very different paradigm. Productivity, I think, has certainly gone up, also because of all the tool sets and how easy it has become, right? And today, obviously, all of you youngsters probably are already talking about vibe coding and all the new stuff that's coming through, right? So that's how the industry is changing. And as on today, it still is very linear. Add people, get top line improvements. But I think we are at a stage, obviously, with the advent of AI and everything that's happening around us. We are absolutely at a pivot point for the industry. And some companies, I think, are already putting out metrics out there that their programmers are already generating millions of lines of code through all the tool sets. They are accepting most of it because obviously, clearly not everything is in a readily deployable state. There is a difference of complexity. But I think the metric I have heard generally accepted in the industry is at least 20 to 40% of your coding. You can make good use of your co-pilots and all of the other tools available. But it still needs humans in the loop, as we call them, right? It still needs humans in the loop. Most companies are still, they're not able to say that, hey, I have cut my headcount by 30% because of this efficiency. I think soon they will be. Probably, when I say soon, probably it'll still take 2-3 years. It's not like tomorrow we go and sack 20% of the workforce. I don't think we are there yet. But I think it will translate into do more with less sort of a thing, to your question on productivity. I don't think it has translated yet into headcount reduction, but I think it will come. It will come. So what it will translate to is you are able to take on deals at a lower price point because of the productivity improvement and things like that. So all that is happening around us. Pretty much everybody I know is already using a co-pilot of some sort or whatever. But again, a lot of people make the AI usage to be that it's a holy grail. It will solve everything. We have already seen these waves in the industry, right? We have seen many tool sets come in, and just that the cycle time was a little slower. Now it has just become rapid, right? So I think the industry will do its pivoting around it. Industry will realize what tools to use, what not to use. Obviously, there is the aspect of hallucination. There is the aspect of data security, the ethical frameworks of AI. All of that is an issue we have to tackle. It's all happening really fast at this point of time. But I think and then let me also talk about the agents. Right? What's the impact of agents? So we all talk about agentic AI and the impact of agents. I think agents certainly are here to stay, no doubt about it, right? And there will be a maturity that will happen around the agents. If any of you saw the acquisition of Capgemini acquiring WNS, most of you probably read about it in the press. I think it's a good example to talk about. It's not the only example, obviously. Every company is trying to do that. Essentially, what the point is, today it's a reality that you can build agents to do a lot of business process. And I'll give you an example. Let's say if you're a company that does, say, taxation as a service, right? So in fact, EY does a lot of tax work. In fact, they're the world's #1 tax processor, right? So you provide tax as a service. And tax is a very complicated area because you have 200 countries and every country has its tax regulation, and then you have tax experts who understand the complexities of tax, right? For example. So clearly so far the industry employed CAs and accountants, and they built all the domain knowledge over all of these years for all these countries, right? And then today we are at a position where we are saying maybe you can just develop a farm of agents that know how the rules are, and then all you need to do is really run these agents, of course with a human in the loop, but most of the initial preparation of your documentation, the creation of the country specific forms and filling of the forms and all of that can all be done by agents. So in fact, many companies have developed agents. We have developed agents as well that can start to take on some of these manual work, right? So what that really means is you start to get productivity improvements, you improve on your accuracy as well, take off manual labor from the loop, right? So I think agentic AI that way is here to stay. It has applicability across a lot of domains. I just used the tax example. I think over a period of time, again, it will start to make humans, probably push humans up the value chain a little bit, right? So you start to push the menial work down. When we have already seen that, but we don't realize it didn't happen because of what we call agents. It happened because of other tools and the abstraction I spoke about, right? So we already seen a bit of wave around that. There will be more of that. So I think in that sense, my assumption is the people in the industry so far will have to, first of all, really think of themselves as, am I a domain expert? Am I a real technical expert? Where do I fall, right? Or am I a very generic programmer? Right? Clearly, the force is against people who are very generic. They don't use AI tools, as they say, right? A human plus AI is much better than a human that uses AI is obviously a lot more powerful than others, right? So I think that's going to come true. So everybody, I think, will have to start using AI tools, thinking AI first in their approach. The example I gave you about the younger generation versus how some of us tend to think, right? So the new generation will be adept at AI. Though they will be like, it's almost like coming into work, carrying all the AI tools in their backpack, right? Almost like ready to hit the ground running. So I think there will be a lot of that. There will be a phasing out of the legacy way of thinking. I think the older professionals who can't adapt will probably phase out, I guess, as well, unless you start to align and start to think about AI. So I think, but again, this is not going to happen tomorrow. My sense is it'll mature over probably like a 2 to 3 year window, and things will settle, price points will start to change, agents will start to emerge. But it is not doomsday for the industry. I think it's an opportunity for the industry. That's how I think about it. A lot of people project it like it's doomsday. It's going to take people's jobs. It will not, right? Obviously, people have always lost jobs over the years because of not being competitive, right? It has been the case. So maybe there'll be a little bit more of that, but I don't think it'll ever be doomsday in that sense. But I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for the industry to reskill, to break away. I think some of the older companies will struggle if they don't keep up. That's the reality, right? Because you were great in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, you will not be great in 2025. That's the reality. So each of us will have to start thinking about what does it mean to be competitive, right? Because already you are being challenged. If you look at the statistics, there are 50 people companies that are competing with the big guys, like, Perplexity, for example, right? Perplexity is competing with Google, and I can't even believe that it's happening. And hardly, a handful of people work at Perplexity. So there's so many examples around that, and the same will happen with the IT service people as well. So I think there will be boutique companies that will start to emerge with 50 people, with 100 people, leading the way on how to build agents, right? Here is how you build agents. Here is how you take trade finance process and how do you put it on agents, and how do you get success with that. So I think there'll be domain specific niche companies that will start to emerge. There is the opportunity to do that. I think if people in this room have to walk away with something like that, you should start thinking about where is that opportunity. Go ahead.
If you're a student today, how will you capitalize on this university? Like, what will you be doing so that when you complete your education, you're well equipped in the marketplace, you get a proper job? Because you can't do the traditional way of going through your software career course.
That's a great question, and I'll answer with a personal example. In fact, my son is 18. He's going through this, right? So, and in fact, I went through the same dilemma last year as I started to think about, of course, he was always interested in computers. And then there is the legacy part of me thinking, hey, will he even have a job in 2 years, right? Because of all the stuff that we are reading and we are working through. So my advice really is, I think it still is a very attractive field, but then you are moving your scope from just being good in just one thing to being good in multiple things. That's point number one, which means, so the second part is you have to start realizing value by connecting the dots. So which means you have to be really on top of all of the stuff emerging and start to visualize the possibilities of, hey, if I combine A with B with C with D, this is how I derive value. Right? So it's all about a lot more imagination than in the past. I don't think software engineering in the past was a lot of imagination. It was really logic. I think we are moving into a phase of creativity and imagination, and just thinking, okay, if I combine these things, here is the value I can derive. The third, I would say, is you pick up a domain on the side, right? Again, I go back to the example I said for my son. I told him, so he's now juggling computer science and economics as two majors, right? So maybe I don't know if it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's a way of thinking to say, okay, maybe the traditional way of thinking was computer science is completely isolated from a domain area, or it's completely isolated from, say, the arts or whatever. But today's, if you look at people in the US, they're completely multidisciplinary. The best people who are doing well in the AI space have not done a computer science degree. They are just good in logic, they're good in common sense, and they are able to just think of possibilities, right? So, and the last part is, in the Indian way of thinking, we always first went to college, we did theory, and then came a time when we started to tinker and do stuff. Today's world is not that. I think day one, you got to be tinkering. You got to have your playground. You got to be building stuff. So the more stuff you do in terms of hackathons and internships, that is really, I think, going to be make or break, I guess. So it's really all about, in fact, there was some video doing the rounds last week, right? There's some maker space in Bengaluru. Some kids are huddled up in a house and building something. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's quite phenomenal. I think there are like 14, 15-year-old kids from all over India. They are in a house in Koramangala. There are some 20 kids just building stuff, right? So I think today's world is all about that. You've got to be trying things and learning by doing. Learning by doing, I think, is today's key. I don't know how our education system will cope. I think it's changing as well, but we should push our younger generation to just hit the ground running and start doing stuff and learn by doing. So it's not about, I did a 4-year degree and then I'm ready to join the industry and then I'm going to learn, right? That is the model I learned. Right? That's not going to work. So it's a very different world in that sense. Okay, how are you on time? Exhausted? I knew it was going to happen. Any one or two questions? We wrap up. Did we answer? Okay, so we answered the AI question, the adding humans for top line question, agents. But this is a phenomenal space. I think I want to conclude by saying that there's so much happening. Like I said, in some ways it feels like this industry has been there for a very long time, but this is a solid pivot point. I think where we are is phenomenal. Nobody can say exactly which way it's going to go, but I think if you are in the space, one, feel proud that you're there. Secondly, I would say maximize the opportunity. I think it's make the time to tinker wherever you are. Even if you're a CEO, I would say you have to make 2 hours a day to just tinker with stuff. You can't be saying, if you don't know the stuff, there is no way you can drive your companies, right? That's the reality, right? Maybe we had those comfort earlier, but not in today's world, right? You got to be there, you got to understand stuff, and you got to push people to kind of realize value by actually doing and tinkering and all of that. I think so there is a lot of headroom to grow companies, a lot of startup spaces. Pick your area, be it domain, be it agents, or an intersection of these things, and you can find a lot of value to do. So someday when I retire in the next 3-4 years, that's what I'm going to do as well. All right, pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.